and welcome to the Amplifying Student Voice and Leveraging Data for Intentional UDL Implementation, presented by James McKenna and Heather Fujita. I'm Sarah Bleeg, Program Support Specialist for SIP, and I will be your moderator along with my colleague Sarah Lincoln for today's breakout session. And with that, Heather and James, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello and welcome. So yes, Sarah, we are here to talk about amplifying student voice and leveraging data for intentional UDL implementation. And we'll be diving into the UDL data toolkit. So my name's Heather Fujita. I work out of the Placer County Office of Education for a grant called CECL, which stands for California Coalition of Inclusive Learning, and I get to go and talk about UDL in all spaces of California and really amplifying places and spaces to help students feel a sense of belonging and inclusion within those environments. And I'm also joined here by James. I'll allow him to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, hi everybody. Very excited to be here with you virtually today. James McKenna. I am the Assistant Director for Professional Learning and Leadership Development at the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, otherwise more normally known as the UDL guy at CCEE. Very excited to be.
Yeah. James, I know you're on a school campus today, and I'm seeing that your voice is stuttering out a little bit. We may have to do camera off.
Sure thing.
Okay. So for today's sessions, we're going to look at, as a result of our time together, we're really wanting to explore how to evaluate UDL implementation using multiple data sources, learn how to use data and a tool matrix that CCEE and other organizations have developed, and then apply tools from the toolbox to really real-world scenarios, and then give you opportunities to collaborate and identify and plan meaningful data collection strategies. So we've taken this idea of UDL and really wanting to see how do we see impact on student learning, and something as addressing barriers and variability within the system, it's really hard to see that impact. So we're trying to come to you with tools so that you can measure those impact. We want to start with inclusive welcome to just kind of ground ourselves. And as a reminder, like, feelings are welcome. This is a space for connection and not perfection. So whether you're energized, uncertain, curious, or overwhelmed, it's all valid here. We know that you've been sitting on Zoom for a long time today. So we just kind of want to say, as you're entering this space, in one word, as you're arriving to this session, how are you feeling? Think about mindset, energy, and mood. And again, all feelings are welcome, and you can go ahead and share those in the chat. Excited, yes, Sarah. Grateful, joyful, wide-eyed. Oh, I love that. Optimistic, hopeful, curious, excited. James is energized, rejuvenated, open, excited, welcomed, curious. I love that. Curious, yes. So really measuring the impact of an implementation of a large take on UDL is really what we're here. So we want to start grounding ourselves in kind of a story. So we're going to start with telling a story, show you some tools, and then have you expand on what your experiences are and how we can help this district. So we have this LEA, it's Davis Joint Unified School District, and they've been implementing UDL district-wide for about a year. And they're investigating professional development and embedding UDL into curriculum design. However, after reviewing student perception surveys and facilitating focus groups, the question still really remains, what UDL strategies are leading to deeper engagement, especially at that secondary level? So their goal, or the doorway that they wanted to enter, was for a UDL to address that development of cohesive and equitable centered student systems of UDL implementation that build that shared understanding, empowers staff to remove barriers, and really amplifies student voice and choice that leads to improved academic, social, and engagement outcomes against all student groups. So how do they do that, and how do they measure that? So despite clear efforts, there was a disconnect between students' experiences of what the intended outcomes were. There was a lot of adults making decisions, a lot of systems being put in place, but was it really resonating with the students in their system to see? So teachers really wanted to focus on content delivery rather than designing for student engagement. So that's what they were noticing within the system. And secondary students in particular reported that learning felt transactional and geared toward earning points and progressing through courses rather than really connecting it to real-world relevance. So there was a need to determine if collaboration practices and professional learning are truly addressing that learner variability and leaving the district asking, is UDL improving relevance and engagement? Are there changes making a real difference for students? And what other data could they collect to better understand that impact? And how could they connect that student, teacher, and collaboration to that data picture and really see that data story to know that their efforts were giving impact? So some of the data pieces that they collected were state testing, right? We have those at our disposal, but doing UDL implementation, you're not going to see that really quickly in a large scale data story, right? So you can look at attendance records. Are students engaged in attending school? But then they also dove deeper and they looked at student surveys and then learning walks to really look at what is happening in those classrooms and is that truly telling those stories? So just kind of have you think for a moment, how many of you have implemented an initiative, collected some data, and then still felt really unsure if you're making that impact? So as you kind of zoom in as your reactions to that, go ahead and put in the chat. You can either agree with that, you can give an emoji, kind of how did that resonate within your own systems of trying to measure impact of something as large as UDL? Story of your life. Yes, Sarah. Mark, I see that you agree. You felt it wasn't enough. Absolutely. Agreed, right? So we're going to take a look at some tools today, and I'm going to pass this over now to James to kind of take us through our objectives as we go.
Thanks. And so our objectives are threefold. So we want to describe a more holistic approach to monitoring implementation and the impact of that implementation. We then we want to apply what you'll learn about the UDL data matrix for making decisions about data and your implementation, and then hopefully you can learn to access tools and guidance from the UDL toolkit to help round out your data and your progress monitoring efforts and inform your implementation. Next slide. And so as we've been sharing in the chat, we've got this resource Padlet, and in there you'll find the slides for this session. You'll also find a handout that has that scenario that Heather just introduced, as well as some tables that we're going to use for an activity. There's links to the UDL data toolkit and support partners across the state that can help with UDL implementation, like CSIL, like Supporting Inclusive Practices, and like our friends at Open Access. And if you go all the way to the right on that Padlet, there is a parking lot that we'll check at the end if we got time for Q&A, but we'll look at ongoing just to see if there are ideas, questions, suggestions, not only on how this session is going, but around data and supports for UDL implementation that you need or you'd like to see.
Okay,
next slide.
Yep, got to get to my slides. There we go. Okay, are you seeing? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I can see your slide. We're going to start by grounding ourselves in some of the big ideas around UDL implementation and data. So this is not going to be a UDL 101. It's just a quick primer that talks about some of the foundational elements of UDL and why we want to take a more holistic approach to how we progress monitor and measure. And that's informed how we've done this toolkit. So UDL, starting off, it's a human-centered focused tool. So it acknowledges the variability within people. We also think about how barriers exist in environments, not people, and takes a holistic look at the whole environment. So not just the student, but the instruction, the assessment, the materials and the media, the culture and the climate of the space in which the learning is happening and the actions being taken. So we want to take that holistic look. Now, Another thing it's important to know is the strategy of UDL. Now, this might sound like semantics, but because I hear a lot, give me the list of UDL strategies. Personally, I say that UDL has one strategy. Everything else is tactics based on this strategy. So it's firm goals and flexible means. So you set clear, challenging goals, and then you provide flexibility within the learning environment by way of options and supports so that everyone can meet the goal, even if they don't all take the exact same approach to get there. So again, there's a lot to unpack in that. We're not doing a 101, but the point I'm making is that UDL is going to show up in the goals we set, in the instructional moves we make, the materials and media we deploy, and the physical and emotional environment in which all of this is taking place. And so we can't rely on a single measure or one or two measures to see, is this working? And again, there it is spelled out for you. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I was just going to say, keeping Davis's mind and goal, where they developed a cohesive and equitable center or equity-centered system of UDL implementation that built on that shared understanding, empowered the staff to remove those barriers, and then tried to amplify those student voice and choice that led, hopefully, to improve student outcome. And that's kind of where we come to say, how do we measure, knowing what their precise goal was, how are we going to measure that over time?
So this slide I think is really important because often when we think about implementation, we think about only changing the behavior of a certain group. So what are the changes we're trying to achieve by implementing universal design for learning, and who needs to change in order for that to happen? First, we want students to experience better academic and social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes. There need to be changes for students. And if we think about learning is enduring behavior change. So students have to change in a good way. To do that, we may need educators to think and act differently. For the educators to do that, they're going to need support. They're going to need coaching, time, resources, opportunities to collaborate. So school leaders are going to need to get involved. And that means not only directly supporting the teachers through coaching, making sure they get training, but also to think about how the systems are in place for the educators to operate in new ways. And as you'll see when we roll out the UDL data matrix, you'll see these 4 groups. We use them as domains. Then we get into, along with those domains, we have different levels of data. We've got large grain, medium grain, and fine grain. Large grain data provides a broad macro view of trends across an entire district or a large organization. So think about, like Heather introduced in the beginning, like the SBAC scores, right? Or attendance across the district. This level of data is often used to assess the overall performance, pick out widespread patterns, and inform district decision-making. So again, district attendance records, state assessments, this can give us a foot view of how well things are going for students in the district. Next, we're going to think about medium grain data. That's a more focused mid-level perspective, typically at the school or program level. So we might still look at, in some certain attendance records, but instead of across the district, we're like, what's attendance looking like at this elementary school or at this grade level? And we might think about student performance in the same way. That gives us a more detailed understanding than the large grain can, and it's useful for targeting specific groups or areas within the districts that may be showing great promise or that are struggling, and we can learn something by leveraging where it's working well to where it's not. Examples, again, grade level standards proficiency, school climate surveys, professional learning community meeting minutes. This level of data helps us connect the big broad trends to, okay, what's it now looking like at this school or grade level? And finally, we have the fine grain. I know a lot of folks are familiar with the term street data. Think about that same level. The fine grain data provides the most detailed micro level insights, typically at the individual student or classroom level. So this allows educators to examine specific cases and hear what's going on for individual people. Now, this really gives us often the why, some or potential whys behind what we're seeing at the medium and the large grain. So this could be student work samples, classroom observations, individual feedback from students or teachers. And by closely examining this data, educators can tailor their different instructional strategies and tactics to support each student's unique needs and ensure that UDL is being implemented effectively on the ground. So let me ask you folks, what have you seen? You can share ideas in the chat, or we can even invite folks to come off of mute and share. What types of data have you seen collected to support implementation efforts, right? And what's been missing in what you've seen?
The youth truth surveys.
Youth truth surveys, right? How students are feeling. Student interviews. Yeah, I love how the first things they're talking about, like, well, what do the kids think? Just go ask them. Classroom walkthrough data. PDSA cycles. Okay. And maybe what we mentioned, you know, those annual student performance data pieces, but what about formative assessment data, right? How does that help us? Or those interim assessment blocks, you know, how do we get closer to what's going on every day rather than that summative assessment? Oh, empathy interviews. Sharon's just teeing us up for later. It's no fair, you know what's coming. Family feedback. Yeah, how do the parents, how do the community feel about what's going on? All right. Yes, Samuel, common formative assessments. So with that, let's get into the toolkit itself. And Heather?
Yep, I'm there. Sorry, I was muted. I was talking, but I was muted. So this toolkit was developed collaboratively, drawing on input from educators and district leaders across the state who are facing similar challenges to what we've discussed earlier. So just kind of the origins of that. So it was developed to address gaps in UDL evaluation, and it's really tools for monitoring and evaluating that implementation. So it was in conjunction with CECL, Open Access, and SIP. And we know that UDL is the mechanism to address equity, agency, and access, but how do we know it's creating an impact on student achievement? So I kind of want to just give you an idea of like what the heart of the toolbox is in this matrix. So it's organized by 4 domains, looking at students, educators, leaders, and systems. And with each domain, its data is broken down into those 3 levels that James was talking about. We've got the large grain, medium grain, and fine grain. So the large grain, as he said, gives you that district-wide view. The medium grain focuses on the specific schools and programs. And then that fine grain really drills down into that individual classroom and those student experiences. Sometimes data can be looked at as fitting different needs depending on how you use it. For example, if you use like a student perception data and only look at the overall percentages of responses, then you're really looking at it through the medium grain data. It's giving you that larger grain of the system in your school, but it's not really telling you that true data story. So if you look at it and you have that opportunity to maybe have narrative responses, within those student perceptions, then it's going to tell you that further story, and it's going to become that fine grain and be a really informative data point for that. I see Sharon's putting in gathering data on UDL impact has been a great need in the field. Absolutely. So we're going to dive into some of the tools that are embedded within the UDL data toolkit.
So first, we want to talk about the student perception survey, and this came out of work that we've been doing with CCE and our grant partners with our UDL implementation learning network. And so here in our second year that we've had, we implemented this student perception survey that we developed with our network partners in our districts. And this is based on the new 3.0 version of the guidelines. And this perception survey is included in the Padlet. And so what we provide is just the basic questions. We have an elementary version and a secondary version so that LEAs can take the questions and then deploy them in whatever mechanism you use locally. So a Google form or Microsoft form, if you use Parsec, if you whatever else you're using to gather data, you can use that platform. We're just providing you questions. In fact, well, some folks will take these questions and then they'll add a question if they want to think about how do I delineate between my levels of data. Hey, I want to ask also students, what grade are you in? Or which elementary school you're in the district, so then I can compare. So if you want to look at this difference between the sites, you can just ask those. So the data always stays with you. That's why we just provide the questions, not a whole platform or a tool that you can take and use. I can say that within our network, folks do share the quantitative data with us, but it's all scrubbed. And though they might gather themes from some of the anecdotal data they gather, we don't collect any student identifying data in the network. Sorry, I faked you out there, Heather.
No, I totally went crazy with my finger on the forward, so I'm sorry about that. So, so our next piece of data is that student focus group, and it really collects student feedback. And I saw that a lot in the chat here, like, what are the students saying, right? This is in service of their support and having them build on their agency. So we want to focus on real life connections and identifying barriers to their learning. So the student focus group protocol created in collaboration with the Davis Joint Unified School District, that was the school that I started out with. This is a tool about getting direct feedback from the students. It asks the students about tools and strategies that help them learn, how connected they feel to what's being taught, and what barriers they see in the classroom. So by involving students in this way, we really get a clearer picture of how UDL is playing out from the learner's perspective, helping educators adjust their approaches to better meet their needs. And just for example, when we first looked at this student focus group protocol, we saw the large grains. We were like, oh, 85% of students are saying yes, they feel that they are connected to their learning goal to real life. But then as we dove into those higher or more fine grain of what they were saying, we were able to say, well, what is the 15% saying why they don't feel that way? And really make some adjustments within the system of how we're helping roll out UDL implementations for the teachers to support those students in that way. So we're going to go back to our practice activity. So kind of back to that story, thinking about Davis and where they've got their data. So we've taken the data that we shared with you and what they've done. So we know that they got their students large grain. We looked at attendance. We looked at state testing. Median grain was that student perception survey. And then in that student perception, we looked at the narrative responses. And then we also engaged in a protocol called instructional rounds, where we went in and looked at evidence of UDL implementation at the classroom level, what was in service of what teachers were doing, and what was in service of what students were doing, and saw trends across time to see, due to this implementation, what are they seeing and hearing within those classrooms? So we want to just give you an opportunity to go into this document and give some suggestions of maybe one or more domain and invite you to give your ideas. What else could they be looking at to give a clear picture of UDL implementation at the Davis Unified School District? So we're going to put you in some breakout rooms, and we want you to just brainstorm additional data points from your assigned domain and assign a recorder to enter ideas into the slide from your domain. So we have given you editing access to this slide deck. So I'm going to go out of my viewpoint here. So you can see here we have some editing access. So go in and we can go ahead and just add in, as you're having a conversation, maybe we've elevated some ideas that you thought, oh, I didn't think about that in terms of supporting UDL, or maybe there's one more way that you think that we could look at either large grain, small grain, and that system, educator, and student perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and open up breakout rooms now. And if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat as I am opening up breakout rooms. And so you're just going to have some discussions regarding data and how we could still look at the implementation for our educators, leaders, systems, and students.
Yeah, and Heather, we're ahead on time. So I
Are
was
we
wondering, maybe we can
really?
make those breakouts like 10 minutes and give them plenty of
Yes.
time. And even if they figured early, they can dig into other parts of the toolkit if they want and use that
You know
time to talk
what?
to each other.
James, I was just going to say that. So I want to go into the Padlet and show them that they have access to that data toolkit. And it points out some other suggestions and ways of measuring that impact of UDL. So you're going to have plenty of time to talk about this and dive into the data toolkit. Okay. James, do you mind, or Sarah, do you mind putting the Padlet in the chat one more time before we send them to breakout rooms?
Will do. Just give me a
Thank you
sec.
so much.
Yeah, and there's a helpful table, interactive table in the handouts. If you look in the first column of the Padlet in the handouts, you scroll down and you can go in that table as well. Awesome.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up rooms. You guys have about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and share any ahas or findings that you saw within the data toolkit and for our implementation journey. Okay, we'll see you in a few.
Oh, well, welcome back, everybody. It was very exciting for us to watch ideas get inputted in real time. So just wanted to open up the space to see whether in chat or come off mic, if anybody wants to share, a particular idea they thought was good, or just a reflection on the activity itself.
James, one that I saw as I was watching was, oh, what level was it on? I saw, oh, the site schedules, PBIS, tiered intervention resources site. So everybody getting kind of on that same page and using common language. I mean, I love that site schedule. I think that's really important when we're thinking about creating places and spaces for students that they feel like they belong, that we're looking at scheduling our students that need support first, and then looking at that other one. So I think that's awesome that it made it on here. And then board policies, like, yeah, looking at a system-wide to see board policies, I think that's great.
Yeah, how well do those policies support or inhibit the idea of flexible paths to those firm goals? And do those site schedules allow for collaborative planning and for those essential walkthroughs that can help teachers and administrators, increase their understanding in their application of universal design for learning? So love seeing these ideas.
I wanted to go back to the leader one too, because I think there were some great ones here. Turnover rates, curriculum-based measures, yeah, staff wellness measures. Yeah, these are great.
And so one of the reasons why we have this matrix laid out, and we said, again, we wanted a holistic picture. And so that leads us into this next concept we want to talk about, called triangulation. This might be familiar to you, but triangulation means we're using multiple sources or types to get a clearer, more accurate understanding of a situation. So it's like seeing something from different angles to get the full picture. So when we're looking at our own efforts, we want to look at these different levels and domains and say, are we only relying on one measure to tell us how students are doing in this area, right? How can we get a more complete picture? You know, are we only relying on one or two measures to see teacher capacity and application for implementing UDL? And so that's why it's important. And we have lots of different ideas around potential data points. But what I want to caution you, when you see just the slides here or the things that we put on in the toolkit, the idea, the message we're sending is not, you need to look at every single one of these pieces, because that could get awfully overwhelming. But could you be strategic in thinking about what will give me a good idea? What am I potentially collecting already that I could now bring into the conversation that can help me and my team better understand what's going on in the classrooms and on our schools?
Yeah. And we always say that UDL is just not one more thing, it's the thing we do. So I just kind of want to go back and thinking about that triangulation and that idea of, we started out with Davis Joint Unified School District and thinking, okay, they did some student perception surveys to see how it's going. They looked at their state testing. But if we think about triangulation, now look at all the ideas that you guys have generated to say, is UDL making an impact? Is it making it into our board policies? Are we having curriculum-based measures? Are we looking at that through empathy interviews for the leaders? Are we looking at staff wellness? If we're using UDL as the mechanism, addressing barriers and planning for that variability within our system, our staff wellness should have a measurable impact, right? And then the instructional rounds. So I just feel like this is a really good smattering of ideas of how to measure impact at multiple levels in multiple groups of that implementation of UDL. So very cool.
Yeah, and that's great, because a lot of times people have their own, different folks will have their different, what we call an on-ramp into implementing UDL. Maybe it's increasing the amount of time students with disabilities are in that least restrictive environment, right? Or maybe it's better supporting their language learners. But if they just stick with those metrics, they may miss that curb cut effect of how it's actually helping kids across the system and the adults, not just in that one metric, but in other places as well. Along with the tools that we've put in there, we developed guidance, and we're continuously working on these things, because there's not one tool to rule them all to look at a particular data point. So sometimes it's more thinking about a concept and then giving you guidance to focus in on an area and the support to contextualize a tool or a tactic based on what you're doing. So one example is, and I'm dropping the link in the chat, we have guidance on assessing learning from professional development. Now, unless everybody did the exact same things in their professional development, had the exact same learning objectives, it would be kind of weird to provide everybody with the same assessment mechanism to see if learning happened in that, just right? There's not one history test to rule them all, what have you. So we give guidance on what are some good ideas on why we should measure learning in professional learning, as well as what is good practice when it comes to how you can best do that, and give you some examples of what it might look like to assess learning pre and post from a professional learning for educators. And so we've got guidance for spotting UDL and PLC minutes. We've got a few different pieces that we've put in there so that you can take these general ideas and these suggestions and contextualize it to what's going to work best for your purposes and for your context. And so what we're hoping you can do after the session is really dig into the toolkit. There's more than you can probably dig into in the next 13 minutes. So we're not going to break out for this, but we really want you to explore this toolkit as time permits and as the moment grabs you. But as you engage with this, again, we have that parking lot, and we're going to give you our emails as well. So give us your ideas, offer us feedback, ask questions, because as you'll see it listed, I think we have it version 1.0. This is going to be an evergreen document. It's going to be a living document that we continuously add to and refine as we learn more, as we build more, as we hear more from folks in the field about what they need and what they find effective. And so to that end, our next steps, Heather?
Yeah, am I on you? Okay. So our next step is, James was saying, is just to continue to gather feedback. As we were developing this UDL data toolkit, we would do many iterations and bring it back to people in the field and say, what is resonating? What do you need in order to help support use this? And what is some gaps that you're seeing? So if you see something there and you're like, you know what, we have this tool and it could be very well enhanced by this and help us triangulate our efforts, we would love to hear that. So continue to give feedback. We're going to continue to, just like he said, we're only at a 1.0 of this toolkit. So we're just going to continue to do augmentation and revision of these tools. And then just keep diving into it. As you explore your implementation efforts, what are ways that you can examine from the system level, the classroom level, the teacher level, and the student level of what impact we are having with that intentionality of your efforts. And then also embedded, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to visit the CCEE Journey Guide, but we will be also embedding this UDL data toolkit within the Journey Guide as well, which also has lots of tools and supports in support of your efforts. And community of practice around this, absolutely, Shamron. We will be rolling out community of practices within the Sacramento, the geographic region here, but also throughout the region of California, of terms of supporting UDL implementation within the different spaces and places. So
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
if I can just say, that work about embedding the data toolkit into the UDL Journey Guide is going on right now. It's just starting. It's going to be an ongoing process. If you haven't been there before, a lot of the same folks that we worked together with on this toolkit came together to develop guidance and suggested resources on how to implement universal design for learning. We worked closely with CAST and their school implementation criteria and translated that to a district level. And created success criteria and suggested steps for meeting those in a sort of 4-stage model for implementation. And so our next piece is bringing the data toolkit in there to enhance the progress monitoring towards that success criteria. So anyway, just
Yeah,
a
and
quick
it's all in
update.
that. Yeah, and it's all in that effort to build coherence across California of how we help support UDL implementation at those different system and classroom levels. So all of it kind of being tied together and pointing us in the same direction for implementation. So with that, we also have a vast collection of universal resources that I want to share with you. This is from our CECL project. It's Universal Supports, and we have webinars, top tips, and Got Minutes that can help support and elevate your work with UDL implementation. So it's from all different, I can go into it because we do actually have a minute. Just kind of want to show you our topics. We've got goal setting, barriers, expert learning, self-reflection. So lots of topics that are out there, and you are having access to webinars, which is an hour webinar. And then you also have the slide decks, access to that, in order to help support that rollout if you're wanting to use that with your staff or as your own continued learning. We also have top tips, which are 1-pagers, kind of like maybe 3 to 5 top tips of how to implement UDL, or top tips of support with that. So maybe around assessment or writing or supporting multilingual learners. And then our Got Minutes series are if you have chunks of time and you want to do maybe learn 10 minutes for the what and why, 20 minutes for the how, and 45 minutes for the application. And these are really powerful. You get the whole slide deck. There are videos and resources and what would you call them, graphic organizers or tools in order to help think through that lens of UDL and supporting either students in your classroom, or if you're leaders in classrooms or leaders of schools, there's lots of ways to kind of help support and elevate that within your PLCs or professional development. So I just wanted to point that out. And also, if you do go ahead and look at our resources, we would love your feedback. There's a feedback button here. If there's a topic that's missing or questions that you have, or just giving us general feedback on our universal resources, we would love that. Okay, anything else, James?
No, I just want to, again, apologies again for not being on camera. There's slim bandwidth where I'm at, so we wanted to at least get the audio right. We really look forward to hearing from you. Want to thank the wonderful folks at Supporting Inclusive Practices for being always such great partners and for having us on today, for our ASL interpreters, and the folks at VFAIR. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your conference.